The easiest target is often the one who already knows you're coming. The late afternoon sun hung low over Interstate 285 just outside Atlanta, washing the highway in warm amber light as commuters drifted home after another ordinary Tuesday. Traffic moved steadily, engines humming beneath an endless sky, while patrol cars sat along the shoulder like silent reminders that someone was always watching. Officer Travis McCall rested comfortably inside his cruiser, one hand draped over the steering wheel, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the stream of passing vehicles. At 41, he looked every bit the experienced officer people expected to trust. Broad shoulders filled his pressed uniform, his clean-cut blonde hair never seemed out of place, and his polished badge caught the sunlight every time another driver glanced his way. To most people, he represented authority. To others, he represented something very different. McCall had developed a reputation that never appeared in official reports. Drivers whispered about him at gas stations and neighborhood barbershops. Small business owners quietly warned friends to avoid certain exits after dark. Complaints had surfaced over the years, but none had stayed alive long enough to threaten his career. Without cameras, without witnesses willing to testify, stories became rumors, and rumors disappeared. That afternoon, a black Chevrolet Tahoe rolled past his cruiser at exactly 5 miles per hour above the posted speed limit. Nothing remarkable. Nothing dangerous. Yet McCall's eyes narrowed as he pulled onto the highway and eased in behind it. The emergency lights flashed, blue and red cutting through the afternoon traffic, and the SUV signaled immediately before rolling safely onto the shoulder. Inside sat Marcus Ellington, a 38-year-old black man with an athletic build, calm brown eyes, and the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to raise his voice to command a room. He wore a navy polo shirt beneath a lightweight jacket, dark jeans, and a stainless steel watch that looked expensive without demanding attention. His hands remained visible on the steering wheel before the officer even reached the window. His breathing stayed steady. His expression revealed nothing beyond polite patience. Imagine sitting there knowing that every word spoken over the next few minutes could change more than one life, yet refusing to let your heartbeat show it. McCall approached slowly, studying Marcus before saying a single word. His smile never reached his eyes. License and registration. Marcus nodded respectfully, retrieved the documents without sudden movement, and handed them over. "Good afternoon, officer." The greeting received no response. McCall looked over the paperwork longer than necessary, occasionally glancing back at Marcus with quiet suspicion that seemed disconnected from the minor traffic stop itself. "Where are you headed?" he finally asked. "Back home after a business meeting." "Business meeting?" McCall repeated, his tone carrying the faintest hint of disbelief. "That's right." Silence settled between them as cars rushed by only a few feet away. Wind stirred loose leaves across the shoulder. Somewhere farther down the interstate, another siren echoed briefly before fading into the distance. McCall leaned slightly closer to the open window, lowering his voice enough that passing drivers could never hear what came next. "You know, we can handle this the easy way if you're willing to cooperate." Marcus met his eyes without flinching. "Officer, I'm not sure what you mean." McCall's expression hardened just enough to erase the last trace of professionalism. He tapped the folded registration against the doorframe once before speaking again. "I think you understand exactly what I mean." Marcus paused for only a second before quietly answering, "Could you repeat that?" Neither man noticed that, deep inside the Tahoe, a tiny indicator light had just changed from dark to solid green. Marcus kept his expression unchanged, almost as if he had not heard the question the first time. The steady rush of traffic continued only a few feet away, creating a curtain of ordinary noise that concealed an increasingly unusual conversation. Officer Travis McCall rested one arm against the open window and looked down at the driver with the confidence of a man who believed every encounter would end exactly the way he wanted. He slowly folded Marcus's driver's license between two fingers before slipping it into his shirt pocket instead of returning it. "A citation can become a very expensive inconvenience," he said calmly. "Court fees, insurance premiums, lost time from work. People usually prefer another option. Marcus tilted his head slightly, careful to sound curious rather than confrontational. Another option? McCall nodded once. Sometimes good people make small mistakes. Sometimes officers are willing to overlook those mistakes if everyone leaves satisfied. Marcus looked forward through the windshield instead of directly at the officer. His eyes settled on the endless stream of passing cars. Families were heading home. Delivery trucks rolled toward evening stops. A school bus disappeared around the next exit. To everyone passing by, this looked like nothing more than another routine traffic stop. That was exactly what made moments like these so difficult to expose. Corruption rarely announced itself. It usually whispered. Imagine driving home after a normal workday and realizing that the person wearing the badge is quietly inviting you into a decision that should never exist. Do you argue? Do you comply? Or do you simply hope the moment ends before it grows worse? Marcus answered carefully. Officer, I would rather handle everything the legal way. McCall smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. That answer sounds nice. It also sounds expensive. He glanced toward the rear of the Tahoe before lowering his voice even further. Nobody has to know what happens out here. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The silence became almost uncomfortable, broken only by the wind brushing across the shoulder and the distant rumble of tractor trailers. Then something unexpected happened. A white pickup truck slowed as it passed the patrol car. The driver looked toward the scene for a moment, as if debating whether something seemed unusual, before continuing down the highway. McCall watched the truck disappear into traffic, waited another few seconds, then stepped closer to Marcus's window. You seem like a smart man, he said. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Marcus gave a slow nod. I understand. That simple response seemed to reassure the officer. McCall relaxed slightly, convinced he was regaining control of the conversation. He never noticed Marcus's right thumb briefly brushing the side of his stainless steel watch. It looked like nothing more than a nervous habit, lasting less than a second before his hand returned to the steering wheel. Yet several miles away, inside a quiet office building, a secure monitoring screen instantly displayed a new timestamp beside Marcus Ellington's name. Nobody in that room spoke. Nobody interrupted. They simply continued watching. Back on the interstate, McCall reached into his pocket and removed Marcus's license again, holding it just out of reach. Tell me something, he said. What exactly was that business meeting about? Marcus answered without hesitation. Accountability. For the first time since the stop began, the officer's confident smile faded ever so slightly, as if the single word had landed somewhere he did not expect, and before either man could say another sentence, a faint vibration pulsed once from the forgotten phone resting inside Marcus's center console. Marcus did not look toward the phone inside the center console, even though he had clearly felt the faint vibration. His eyes remained forward, focused somewhere beyond the flowing traffic, while Officer Travis McCall interpreted the silence as hesitation. Years of repeating the same routine had convinced the officer that every driver eventually reached the same point. Some argued. Some pleaded. Most simply gave in. He believed patience always favored the person wearing the badge. Let me save you a lot of trouble, McCall said in a calm voice that sounded almost friendly. Nobody enjoys paperwork. You do not want to spend the next 3 months dealing with court dates over something this small. Marcus slowly turned his head. If I made a mistake, I will accept the citation. The answer was polite, measured, and completely free of emotion. It was not the response McCall expected. The officer studied Marcus for another moment, searching for signs of nervousness that never appeared. His breathing remained steady. His shoulders stayed relaxed. Even his hands rested naturally on the steering wheel, never fidgeting, never reaching for anything. Imagine standing on the side of an interstate believing you have complete control of the situation, while the person sitting in front of you seems strangely comfortable with every passing minute. Would that confidence make you curious, or would it tempt you to push even harder? McCall chose the second option. Step out of the vehicle for me. Marcus complied immediately. He unfastened his seatbelt, stepped onto the gravel shoulder, and quietly closed the driver's door behind him. Tractor-trailers thundered past only yards away, their wind briefly tugging at both men's clothing before fading into the endless stream of evening traffic. McCall walked a slow circle around the black Tahoe, glancing through the windows with practiced confidence. The cabin looked unusually organized. There were no loose papers, no clutter, no half-finished drinks, nothing except a neatly folded jacket on the back seat and a slim leather briefcase secured behind the passenger seat. His attention lingered there for only a second before returning to Marcus. "What is in the briefcase?" he asked. "Work materials," Marcus answered. "Mind opening it?" Marcus maintained eye contact. "If there is a legal basis to do so, I will cooperate." The sentence was respectful, but something about it caused McCall's jaw to tighten. Drivers usually answered with fear or irritation. Marcus answered like someone who understood procedures unusually well. For the briefest instant, uncertainty flickered across the officer's face before disappearing behind another confident smile. "You know the law pretty well," he remarked. Marcus gave the slightest shrug. "I believe everyone should." A gust of wind swept across the shoulder, carrying the scent of fresh asphalt and distant rain. Neither man noticed a gray sedan moving slowly through the right lane before continuing past without changing speed. Inside, two people glanced toward the traffic stop, exchanged a silent look, and kept driving as though nothing deserved a second glance. Miles away, another timestamp quietly appeared on the same secure monitoring screen. A new line of text flashed only 3 words before disappearing again. Subject remains compliant. Back on the interstate, McCall reached for his portable radio, hesitated, then lowered his hand without pressing the transmit button. Whatever decision had crossed his mind, he chose not to share it with dispatch. Marcus noticed the hesitation but said nothing. Sometimes the loudest clue was not what someone did. It was what they deliberately chose not to report. Then McCall looked directly at the locked briefcase once more and spoke with a confidence that sounded rehearsed. "I think we are about to find something very interesting in your vehicle." Marcus answered with the same calm expression he had worn since the flashing lights first appeared behind him. "I believe we are, officer." At that exact moment, another vehicle quietly exited the interstate less than 1 mile ahead, turned into an empty parking lot, and waited without anyone inside taking their eyes off the highway. The words lingered in the air long after Marcus spoke them, calm enough to sound ordinary yet precise enough to make Officer Travis McCall wonder why this driver refused to react like everyone else. Most people standing beside a highway shoulder eventually became anxious. Their voices grew faster, their hands became restless, and their eyes searched for a way out. Marcus did none of those things. He simply waited. The fading sunlight stretched long shadows across the pavement while the steady flow of evening commuters continued only a few feet away, each passing driver unaware that a quiet test of character was unfolding in plain sight. McCall reached toward the rear passenger door and glanced back at Marcus before speaking again. "You said there are work materials inside that briefcase." Marcus nodded once. "That is correct." "Then you will not mind showing me." Marcus answered with the same measured tone he had used since the beginning of the stop. "If you are asking for my consent, I respectfully decline. If you believe you have legal authority, I will not interfere." The response landed differently this time. McCall's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had expected fear. He had expected bargaining. Instead, every answer sounded like it had been carefully chosen without sounding rehearsed. Imagine watching someone refuse to argue, refuse to panic, and refuse to surrender their dignity. Sometimes silence creates more pressure than shouting ever could. McCall stepped away from the Tahoe and looked up and down the shoulder as if confirming nobody nearby was paying attention. The nearest vehicles rushed past without slowing. A delivery van disappeared beyond the next overpass. The afternoon felt ordinary again, almost too ordinary. Then the officer lowered his voice. "You are making a simple situation unnecessarily complicated." Marcus looked directly at him. "I would prefer that everything we do today follows policy." Those final two words lingered between them. Follows policy. For a fraction of a second, something shifted behind McCall's confident expression. It was not fear. Not yet. It was recognition. The phrase sounded familiar, almost like language used inside departmental training rather than by the average motorist. Before he could dwell on the thought, his portable radio crackled with routine dispatch traffic involving another patrol unit several miles away. McCall glanced at the radio but chose not to answer. Instead, he clipped it back onto his shoulder and focused entirely on Marcus again. That decision did not go unnoticed. Inside the Tahoe, hidden beneath the dashboard where nobody standing outside could possibly see it, another tiny recording indicator quietly remained illuminated. Every pause, every question, every unanswered radio transmission continued to be preserved with exact timestamps. Several miles away, inside an unmarked office suite, a digital waveform rolled steadily across a secure monitor as voices arrived in real time. No one interrupted the recording. No one celebrated. Experienced investigators understood that the smallest details often carried the greatest weight. Back on the interstate, McCall folded his arms. "You know," he said slowly, "people who cooperate usually leave here much faster." Marcus offered a polite smile that never appeared forced. "Real cooperation protects everyone involved, officer." Once again, the answer sounded respectful while quietly refusing to bend. Another gust of wind swept across the shoulder, carrying the distant scent of approaching rain. The sky had begun changing from gold to deep orange, and headlights gradually appeared along the interstate. Then Marcus noticed something almost invisible in his side mirror. A dark gray sport utility vehicle had merged into traffic several hundred yards behind them. It neither accelerated nor slowed. It simply remained there, blending perfectly into the evening commute. McCall never looked in that direction. Marcus did, but only for the briefest instant before returning his attention to the officer. Somewhere inside the approaching vehicle, someone quietly removed an identification wallet from a jacket pocket, checked the time, and waited for one more sentence to be spoken. Marcus remained exactly where he was, hands relaxed at his sides, while the evening breeze swept across the shoulder of the interstate. There was something almost unusual about the stillness surrounding him. It was not the stillness of uncertainty. It was the quiet confidence of someone who understood that patience often revealed more than confrontation ever could. Officer Travis McCall, however, interpreted that composure very differently. To him, it looked like resistance wrapped in politeness. He had spent years relying on hesitation, intimidation, and the assumption that no ordinary driver would ever challenge his version of events. Yet this encounter refused to follow the pattern he knew so well. "Last opportunity," McCall said, folding his arms across his chest. "We can solve this right here, or we can spend the rest of the evening making your life considerably more difficult." Marcus answered without changing his tone. "I appreciate the choice, officer, but I will continue cooperating within the law." The words sounded respectful, almost understated, yet they seemed to remove every shortcut McCall expected to use. Imagine realizing that someone across from you is not arguing because they have nothing to prove. Imagine recognizing that every calm response quietly shifts the balance of the conversation without raising a single voice. That realization never crossed McCall's mind. Instead, he took one slow step closer and studied Marcus's face again, almost searching for the smallest crack in his confidence. He found none. The passing traffic continued to create an endless curtain of sound, shielding the conversation from everyone except the two men standing beside the black Tahoe. Then McCall casually glanced toward the interior of the vehicle once more. His attention paused on the stainless steel travel mug sitting neatly inside the front cup holder. It looked completely ordinary. So did the phone resting inside the center console. So did the dashboard. Nothing appeared unusual. Yet if anyone had looked just beneath the lower edge of the dashboard, they would have noticed a factory-installed fleet monitoring module that blended perfectly with the vehicle's original equipment. It had been there since the SUV left the government maintenance garage several days earlier, impossible to recognize without knowing exactly where to look. Miles away, inside a secure conference room, Captain Olivia Bennett stood silently behind a bank of monitors while two internal affairs investigators reviewed the incoming audio stream. Nobody interrupted the recording. Nobody celebrated the progress being made. Professional investigations depended on discipline, not emotion. Every statement was carefully logged. Every pause received a timestamp. Every decision mattered because facts, not assumptions, would ultimately determine the outcome. One investigator quietly looked toward Captain Bennett. He still has not requested consent correctly. She nodded once without taking her eyes off the screen. Keep recording. Back on the interstate, McCall removed a small notepad from his uniform pocket but never wrote anything down. Instead, he flipped through several blank pages before slipping it away again, as though trying to create the appearance of routine procedure. Marcus noticed the gesture but offered no comment. Sometimes performance was just as revealing as action. A cloud drifted across the lowering sun, softening the orange light that stretched over the highway. Headlights became brighter as dusk slowly approached. Then another subtle detail caught Marcus's attention. The dark gray sport utility vehicle that had remained several hundred yards behind was no longer alone. A silver sedan had quietly positioned itself 2 lanes over, maintaining nearly the same speed with remarkable consistency. Neither vehicle attracted attention from ordinary motorists because neither behaved unusually. Together, however, they formed a pattern visible only to someone who already knew where to look. McCall remained completely unaware. He looked back at Marcus and finally asked a question that sounded almost casual. Tell me honestly. Have you ever dealt with internal affairs before? Marcus held his gaze for one long second before offering the faintest smile. More often than you might imagine. For the first time since the traffic stop began, the confidence in McCall's expression faltered, and at that exact moment, the encrypted phone hidden inside the center console illuminated with a single incoming message that displayed only 2 words before the screen locked itself again. Stand by. The words remained suspended between them long after Marcus answered, and for the first time since the traffic stop began, Officer Travis McCall found himself studying the driver with genuine uncertainty instead of quiet superiority. More often than you might imagine. It was such an ordinary sentence, delivered with such effortless composure, that it almost disappeared beneath the endless rhythm of passing traffic. Almost. McCall forced a short laugh, convincing himself he had simply encountered another confident businessman trying to sound important. He had seen plenty of people bluff before. They usually folded within minutes. Everybody suddenly becomes an expert when they get pulled over, he replied with a faint smile. Funny how that works. Marcus returned the smile politely. Knowledge is available to anyone willing to learn. There was no challenge in his voice. No sarcasm. Just quiet confidence. Somehow, that made the answer even more unsettling. Imagine standing face to face with someone who never raises his voice, never loses his patience, and never gives you a reason to accuse him of being difficult. Every attempt to gain control seems to slip away without a single argument. That kind of silence forces people to reveal themselves. McCall looked toward the interstate again before lowering his voice. Let me ask you one final time. Are you absolutely certain you want this handled through official channels? Marcus answered without hesitation. Yes, officer. Official channels protect both of us. Those last 4 words echoed in McCall's thoughts longer than he expected. Protect both of us. Why would a driver phrase it that way? Before he could explore the question, another routine transmission crackled across his shoulder radio. Dispatch requested a status update on several units working the evening shift. McCall reached for the microphone, pressed the button halfway, then stopped. After a brief pause, he released it without responding. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but somewhere else it was immediately noticed. Inside the secure monitoring room, one investigator quietly marked another timestamp while Captain Olivia Bennett folded her arms. Second unanswered status request, one analyst observed. Bennett nodded calmly. Documented exactly as it occurred. Nobody celebrated. Nobody speculated. Facts accumulated one decision at a time. Back beside the Tahoe, the evening sky continued fading into deeper shades of blue. Interstate headlights stretched into long ribbons of white and red, and the air carried the first hint of cooler night temperatures. McCall took a slow walk around the vehicle again, stopping briefly near the rear bumper. His eyes narrowed as he examined the license plate frame. It carried the logo of an Atlanta luxury dealership, nothing unusual. He glanced through the rear window toward the leather briefcase still resting behind the passenger seat. Something about that briefcase continued bothering him, although he could not explain why. It looked almost too ordinary. Marcus remained exactly where he had been instructed to stand, hands visible, posture relaxed, watching the officer without appearing to watch him at all. His stainless steel watch reflected the fading sunlight for only an instant before the face went dark again. Hidden beneath the polished exterior, another encrypted confirmation quietly reached the secure monitoring system. Audio quality verified. Chain of custody active. The message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Then something changed. The dark gray sport utility vehicle that had blended into traffic for the past several minutes exited the interstate and disappeared from sight. At nearly the same moment, the silver sedan continued forward before calmly taking the next exit as well. To every passing commuter, both vehicles had simply continued their evening drive. Only Marcus understood that the movement meant the operation had entered its next phase. McCall noticed none of it. Instead, he reached into his pocket, removed Marcus's driver's license once more, looked down at it for several silent seconds, and quietly said, "There is something about you that does not add up." Marcus met his eyes with the same calm expression he had worn since the flashing lights first appeared behind him. "You are closer to the answer than you realize." Before McCall could respond, a pair of headlights appeared at the end of the entrance ramp behind the patrol car, and this time the approaching vehicle was not trying to blend in. The approaching headlights grew brighter as the vehicle rolled smoothly onto the shoulder several car lengths behind Officer Travis McCall's patrol cruiser. It was an ordinary dark sport utility vehicle with no emergency lights, no visible markings, and nothing that would attract a second glance from passing motorists. McCall barely looked over his shoulder before dismissing it as another driver stopping to make a phone call. His attention returned to Marcus Ellington, who remained composed beneath the fading evening sky. The wind carried the scent of fresh rain across the interstate while the steady rhythm of traffic continued uninterrupted, as though the rest of the world had no idea that a single conversation was about to change everything. "You have been unusually calm since the moment I stopped you," McCall observed. Marcus answered with the same measured voice. Remaining calm usually helps everyone make better decisions. The officer gave a skeptical smile. "Or maybe you think somebody is coming to help you." Marcus held his gaze without hesitation. Everyone is responsible for helping themselves by making the right choices. The answer seemed almost philosophical, but it carried a quiet weight that McCall could not quite explain. Imagine hearing someone offer every opportunity to step back, every opportunity to correct course, yet mistaking patience for weakness. Sometimes the greatest warning is delivered in the calmest voice. McCall looked toward the unmarked sport utility vehicle once again. The driver's door had opened, but no one stepped out immediately. Instead, the interior light briefly illuminated before fading again. It looked completely ordinary, yet something about the timing caused the smallest flicker of uncertainty to cross his face. He quickly dismissed it. "Let us finish this," he said, reaching into his pocket and removing Marcus's driver's license. I still believe there is more to this story. Marcus nodded slightly. On that point, we agree. Several seconds passed in silence. Then the driver of the unmarked vehicle finally stepped onto the shoulder. Dressed in a charcoal business suit instead of a uniform, the man closed the door calmly and walked at an unhurried pace toward the patrol cruiser. At nearly the same moment, a second individual emerged from the passenger side carrying a slim leather portfolio. Neither person displayed urgency. Neither interrupted the conversation. They simply continued walking with quiet confidence. McCall noticed them now, his posture becoming noticeably more alert. "Can I help you?" he called before they reached the front of the cruiser. The taller man offered a polite smile. "In just a moment, officer." His voice was calm, professional, and remarkably familiar to anyone who had spent years inside law enforcement. McCall instinctively looked toward Marcus, expecting confusion or surprise. Instead, Marcus simply remained where he was, hands visible, expression unchanged. That was when a subtle realization began forming in the officer's mind. Why had the driver never asked to call anyone? Why had he never complained? Why had every answer sounded so deliberate? Why had he insisted on official procedures from the very beginning? Hundreds of questions seemed to arrive at once, each one arriving just a little too late. The suited man stopped a respectful distance away and looked first at Marcus, then at McCall. Without saying another word, he gave Marcus a small, almost imperceptible nod. Marcus returned the gesture just as subtly. No handshake. No dramatic announcement. Just silent recognition between two professionals. McCall felt the atmosphere change before anyone spoke. The evening no longer felt ordinary. The interstate noise seemed farther away, replaced by the quiet awareness that the conversation had entered unfamiliar territory. The second suited investigator opened the leather portfolio, removed a sealed identification wallet, and held it at his side without revealing its contents. "Officer McCall," the first man said evenly, "before we continue, there is one procedural matter we need to address." McCall stared at the closed identification wallet, suddenly realizing that whatever was inside it would answer every question he had been trying not to ask. The sealed identification wallet remained closed for another long second, long enough for the silence to become impossible to ignore. Officer Travis McCall shifted his weight, trying to regain the confidence that had carried him through countless traffic stops, but something had already changed. The conversation no longer belonged to him. The taller man in the charcoal suit calmly opened the wallet and held it where McCall could read it without stepping closer. The gold credentials reflected the last light of the evening as the words Internal Affairs Division became unmistakably clear. McCall stared at the identification, then instinctively looked back at Marcus Ellington. Marcus did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply stood with the same composed expression he had maintained since the flashing lights first appeared behind his vehicle. "Good evening, Officer McCall," the investigator said evenly. "I am Special Agent Daniel Mercer, Internal Affairs Division. This is Investigator Rachel Lawson. We are conducting an authorized administrative investigation." The words landed with far greater force than any raised voice ever could. For the first time that evening, McCall seemed unable to find an immediate response. "Administrative investigation," he repeated quietly. Mercer nodded once. "Yes." McCall looked toward Marcus again, his confusion becoming impossible to hide. "Who exactly is he?" Mercer turned slightly toward Marcus before answering. "Senior Undercover Internal Affairs Investigator Marcus Ellington." The interstate continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Cars passed. Headlights stretched across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a truck sounded its horn before disappearing into the evening. Yet for McCall, the entire highway suddenly felt perfectly still. Imagine believing you are evaluating someone else, only to discover that every decision you made had been quietly evaluated from the very beginning. That realization does not arrive all at once. It unfolds one fact at a time. Marcus finally spoke, his voice remaining calm and professional. "Officer McCall, this operation did not begin today. Today's contact was one part of a larger investigation authorized through proper channels." There was no accusation in his tone. Only facts. Mercer opened the leather portfolio carried by investigator Lawson and removed several documents secured inside transparent evidence sleeves. "Your radio activity, your statements during this encounter, and the complete audio and video record of this stop have been preserved according to departmental evidence procedures." McCall's eyes immediately moved toward the black Tahoe. "You recorded this?" Marcus answered honestly. "Department-approved equipment documented the encounter from the moment your emergency lights were activated." The officer slowly exhaled, replaying every sentence in his mind. Every pause. Every unanswered dispatch request. Every suggestion that had seemed harmless only minutes earlier. In the secure monitoring room several miles away, Captain Olivia Bennett quietly watched the live transmission end as another analyst confirmed that every evidence file had been successfully archived without interruption. "Chain of custody confirmed," the analyst reported. Bennett gave a small nod. "Good. Maintain protocol." Back on the shoulder, Mercer carefully returned his credentials to the identification wallet before speaking again. "Officer McCall, this investigation remains ongoing. We are requesting that you preserve all department-issued equipment and make no further statements regarding this matter until formal administrative procedures begin." McCall opened his mouth as if searching for an explanation, but none came. He looked once more at Marcus, who met his eyes with neither anger nor satisfaction. Only quiet professionalism. The evening breeze swept across the shoulder again, carrying the first drops of light rain onto the pavement. Then Investigator Lawson looked down at the next document inside the portfolio, paused for a brief moment, and said softly, "There is one additional finding that neither of you has seen yet." Investigator Rachel Lawson carefully lifted the final document from the portfolio and placed it beside the others without dramatics or unnecessary words. "This report summarizes information gathered over the past 8 months, she said calmly. "Today's encounter is not being evaluated by itself. It is one event within a larger administrative review." Officer Travis McCall looked from the document to Marcus Ellington, then back again. The confidence that had defined the beginning of the traffic stop had quietly disappeared, replaced by the unmistakable realization that every decision carried consequences extending far beyond a single afternoon on the side of the interstate. Marcus remained composed, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. There was no satisfaction in his expression. No anger. No celebration. Imagine believing that power belongs to the person asking the questions, only to discover that true accountability belongs to the person willing to wait patiently for the truth to reveal itself. Sometimes justice arrives without raised voices. Sometimes it simply arrives prepared. Lawson continued in the same professional tone. "The evidence collected today will be reviewed together with previously documented material through established departmental procedures. Every statement, every recording, and every report will receive the same objective evaluation." Mercer closed the portfolio and looked toward McCall with measured professionalism. "You will receive formal notification regarding the next administrative steps through your department. Until then, preserve all department-issued equipment and follow existing reporting requirements." McCall slowly nodded. There was little else to say. The evening had become a lesson that could not be argued away. Around them, traffic continued moving toward home, families gathered for dinner, and the ordinary rhythm of life never paused long enough to notice that a quiet moment of accountability had unfolded only a few feet away. Marcus finally stepped toward his Tahoe after Mercer handed back his driver's license. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. It was the first time he had accepted the document since the stop began. He opened the driver's door, paused for a moment, and looked back toward McCall one final time. "A badge earns public trust every single day," he said in the same calm voice that had never changed throughout the encounter. "The moment someone believes it exists for personal advantage instead of public service, that trust begins to disappear." The words were neither a lecture nor a threat. They were an observation shaped by experience. McCall lowered his eyes briefly before giving a quiet acknowledgement. Whether he was thinking about the investigation, the recordings, or the choices that had brought him to that shoulder of Interstate 285, only he knew. Mercer and Lawson returned to their unmarked vehicle with the same quiet professionalism they had displayed from the moment they arrived. No emergency lights flashed. No crowd gathered. No dramatic scene unfolded. Real accountability rarely looked the way people imagined. More often, it began with careful documentation, patient investigation, and respect for due process. Marcus settled into the driver's seat, started the engine, and merged safely back into the evening. Traffic. The dashboard indicator that had silently documented the encounter switched off as the operation officially concluded. Far behind him, the fading sunlight disappeared beneath the horizon while the first streetlights illuminated the highway ahead. Another ordinary commute resumed, yet everyone involved understood that nothing about the day had truly been ordinary. Somewhere inside the Internal Affairs Office, the final evidence file was archived, the timestamps were verified, and the case moved forward through the system exactly as procedure required. Justice had not arrived through anger. It had arrived through preparation, patience, and truth. And as Marcus continued driving toward the Atlanta skyline, one quiet thought remained long after the flashing lights had vanished behind him. Authority may command attention, but integrity is what earns lasting respect.